Hello, friends, and welcome back to Retro Unscripted. My name is Peter, and I thank you once again for joining me today. Back in 1991, when I arrived back at my house from Toys R Us in Auburn, Massachusetts with my Super Nintendo Entertainment System with Super Mario World in tow, the first thing I did after setting up my Super Nintendo and before I started to play was I looked at this thing. This is called an instruction booklet. For some of you who are new to the gaming world, instruction manuals used to be pretty common items. These used to range anywhere from a few pages to up to 30. This guy is 30 pages. And would show you things that were pretty important, such as the control layout, which is pretty important to be able to learn to play the game. Or would show you basics about Mario's powers and what he could do depending on what power-ups that he collected. Or you could even take a look inside of here and you could check out Yoshi's Island as an overview and find out where it was that you were going. When I read this before I played Super Mario World, I was ready to go. I had the controls down for the most part. There was no tutorial needed. I could just pick up and play, and the game felt very comfortable, and I knew what I was looking for going in. I knew that I was on Yoshi's Island, I had some idea of the background and the story, so I was able to enjoy it more. Of course, these days, instruction manuals are relics for the most part. Instruction manuals are included as part of a game disc or game information, so you actually have to look it up while the game is on. You can't take it out and look at it while you're waiting for the game to load or anything. You have to access it from the disc, and it's very weird. But not to use the old man terminology, but back in my day, instruction manuals were really part of buying a new game and getting ready for playing a new game. It was something that you looked forward to. After taking the cellophane wrapping off of the box or off of the case and then opening it up, you could look in the instruction manual and see how cool the game was, see how complicated the controls were, see what the storyline was like. And that's something that, unfortunately, we've lost in this day and age. Now, a lot of people will argue that instruction manuals are waste of resources and basically bad for the environment. I don't agree with that. I think it's rather silly. But again, folks are entitled to those opinions, and I'm not one to tell them otherwise as far as how they feel. But what I'm going to do over the next few minutes is I'm going to break down some instruction manuals that I have in my library that really kind of underscore why instruction manuals were cool things to have back in the day, I guess. Let's take a look first at a game that everybody is familiar with, The Legend of Zelda from Nintendo. Legend of Zelda, of course, was one of the first games of its kind. And if you look at the instruction manual itself, it's in full color. This is a long time ago. The world was in an age of chaos. And it actually gives you a story and a setup. And then as you read through the story, there's some storyboards there with some fully drawn and colored pictures. And the whole manual, this is more than 40 pages. All 40 pages worth are in color. And this was something that you wanted to have with you. This was something that you wanted to read in advance so that you knew what you were getting into before you started to play. Once you started to play, of course, if you got stuck, those of you who bought the game new or were lucky enough when they bought a complete in-box copy still have this, you could refer to the maps and strategies foldout that came with the game. Now, Nintendo warns you right up front that this is something that you only want to open if you absolutely have to. Can you and your wits alone save Zelda? Well, they certainly weren't enough for me. This map holds useful information to help you discover the Triforce fragments and rescue Zelda. You should only use the map and strategic tips as a last resort. Yeah, right. If you believe in yourself and your inner strength, you will conquer Ganon and return peace to the land of Hyrule. This came with every new copy of the game. Now, if you opened it up and just wanted to see a little bit, the first and second dungeon layouts were here. There's like the eagle or the lamp, I like to call it. There's the crescent moon down there. And then if you opened it up further, just a little bit, you had information as to how to make an adventure map. And there were some other initial dungeon layouts for levels 3 through 7 down the bottom there. And if you really wanted to see everything that the game had to offer, then you could completely open it up and you could see the entire layout of Hyrule, or at least mostly filled in, so you could get an idea, your sense of bearings and where you were. So this was a really neat concept. Now granted, this game came out before the internet was even really a thing, so of course, unless you had a ton of money to call Nintendo, or you had a subscription to Nintendo Power, maps and strategies were kind of difficult to come by, so it was really nice to have this in the package as kind of a failsafe if you got lost or stuck. So that's one example. Legend of Zelda is still a great game, and if you don't have it in your collection, obviously, it's recommended. It's one of those games that just belongs in every library. Next one is Metal Gear. Not Metal Gear Solid. This is the original Metal Gear from Ultra. Now in here, this is all black and white. This isn't color like the Legend of Zelda manual is, and Konami takes some rather humorous liberties. The enemy in the game is called Vermin Katafi, who obviously is a takeoff of Muammar Gaddafi. If you look at some of the enemies in the game, which are right here, and I got to remember I'm opposite because I'm on camera. There's some funny stuff like B.A. Dozer, who's the I Feel Asleep guy. Train Killer Scorpions, which are right there. And the Dogs of War, which are right here. So the manual doesn't take itself seriously, but it still gives you the basics on how to play. But the great thing about this was Metal Gear also came with its own little foldout. And in the foldout, there are actually maps that kind of walk you through where to go. And that actually extends to the back, too. So, again, very cool to have if you get stuck playing Metal Gear, and Metal Gear is not a game for everybody. It was a unique concept back then to be kind of stealthy and not get seen. So this was valuable information. And again, unless you called Nintendo or had a subscription to Nintendo Power or was able to get some tips in monthly magazines, this was really your best bet. Then there are lesser games, like this guy right here is Castle Quest from Nextsoft, 1989. So this game is now 25 years old. Yeah, catch your breath there. 25 years ago. This game is also in color, or this manual is also in color. Gives you some basics about the characters and such. But what's notable about this is it's another map foldout. Here's like some information about Castle Quest here. But what's notable is that if you open this out and expand it, it actually gives you the layout for the entire game. And there are some arrows that show you which way to go. So that's also neat. And again, it was completely free when you bought the game, as long as you bought it new. And someone else didn't take it out if you bought it used. Even in a sports game like NFL football from LJN. Also taking time here, speaking of LJN, to plug my buddy Matt's channel. He does LJN Defender stuff. I'm going to link his channel below. Great guy, great content. You should check his stuff out. But anyway, that's your plug for the video. This game from 1988, obviously it's a sports game, it's a football game. There is some audible information over here, and they give you some other gameplay basics. But if you weren't really sure how football games are played, or weren't really sure how the plays work, there's actually a foldout here that shows you defensive plays and also offensive plays. So you could figure out which way the players were going to run, which way the receivers were going to break, and that was really good information for people that weren't too familiar with how football worked or didn't really have much of an idea, aside from what they watched on TV, how football games operated. Here's a game that people are going to remember. This is Star Tropics right here. Now, Star Tropics, this is another manual that is in full color, as you can see. But what came with this game, what's notable, is a special letter that Uncle Steve sends to Mike. Here's the letter itself, and you can see Uncle Steve's signature down there, as well as the warning not to eat the paper, because of course there's a special trick with this letter that I'm not going to spoil in this video, but this letter expanded the level of interaction between the player, the documentation, and the game. So this was really neat and came with the instruction manual. Games these days, it's very difficult to do that because there's no manual that comes with it. If you go as late as 1998 with Metal Gear Solid, there is a very specific game hint that comes on the back of the CD case. If you don't have the CD case, you might not have the answer to one of the game's riddles. So pretty important stuff there. And then we come to the big one, Final Fantasy. This, of course, is the first game, and it was published by Nintendo. This is a 75-page behemoth of a manual, and it actually is part manual, part walkthrough. Just to give you an idea, telling you to go shopping in Elfland and gives you a rundown of that particular area in the game. So not only did you get a full manual that gave you the training wheels to get you started, but you also got maps that came with it. There were 2 of them, in fact. Here's the first one, which is the game world map. And on the back, there's a creature compendium. But also, you got a second fold-out that came with the game that also gave you maps. This was for the dungeons. Sorry about that. So there's the map there with the dungeons. And then on the back of that, there was a table for magic weapons and armor. So you got a ton of information as part of the game that you could refer to at will. You could actually have the walkthrough open and go through as you're playing, or you could read during dinner or before bed, so you knew that the next day when you're going to play, you had some ideas as to where you were going to go or what strategies you were going to take. So, big deal. You know, I mean, that was why we looked forward to opening games when we were younger, is because of stuff like that. You never knew what was going to be in there. Is it going to be a full instruction manual like that? Are there going to be posters in there? Are there going to be catalogs for other games coming out? You never knew, and it was like opening a gift, even though you had to pay for it. And I always thought that was pretty neat. And then the last things that I want to share, there are a couple of manuals that I've kept over the years, even though I don't have the games for. Like this is the Mighty Final Fight manual here. This game is difficult to come by, but if I ever do, now I have the manual to be able to play it. And then the one that I'm most proud of, in the game I'm hoping to get someday when the price isn't as exorbitant as it is now, is RC Pro-Am 2. RC Pro-Am 2, which is from 1992, is a really good follow-up to the original game, and something I had fun playing back before I had my Dreamcast, and then I was an idiot and traded it in, as well as my other NES games. But I kept the manual, because manuals weren't really required back in that time. I was working for FuncoLand as a store manager, and we were directed at that time that when games were traded in, when NES games were traded in, the boxes and the manuals needed to be thrown away, which was a killer for me. I didn't want to, especially the manuals, I didn't want to get rid of them. So in fact, and I'll try and do this without making a big mess, this right here, this is all instruction manuals that I kept. And let's see, I worked for Funko in 1999, so this is 15 years old. And I have, these are just my spare manuals. The other manuals I have for the NES games in my collection, which is a pretty decent stack. So I couldn't let those be thrown out. There was no way I was going to let that happen. So when the games were being put on the shelves and we were getting ready to throw those out, I made the decision to just keep them. I put them in a box, which degraded over time, and now I have this bin. And I keep that with me so that as I increase the number of NES games that I have, I'll have the manuals for them. Or if there are people that are really looking for manuals and they can't seem to find them, and they're for games that I'm probably never going to add or find, I can either work out deals or I can give them. My buddy Sam Hicks, who's Samurai Sam, he's also a relative of mine. And he can tell you that I set him up with a couple of manuals from my collection here, because I just think that manuals are that important. Not even so much for the collector's value, but just because that's part of what the game was. The box you could take it or leave it, because cartridges had the slip covers, but the manuals themselves, the manuals to me were part of the game. The manuals to me were something you could read at will that would make you excited for the game, that you could go back to if you hadn't played in a while, that could refresh you on how to play. And with the with manuals kind of going by the boards as they have, it's very difficult to do that. You have to pause the game and then go into whatever the digital manual is to try and remember what control did this or how to pull off this move, and it to me, it's frustrating and it's disappointing, because now when you buy a game, you're buying a game, you're getting the case and you're getting the disc that it's on, if you're even that lucky, and that's it. You don't get the manual, you don't get any kind of random posters or anything that is basically a pat on the back for spending the money on that product. You're just getting the product itself. Some people look at that as filler or extra stuff. Myself, I looked at it as a bonus, and I treasured and loved every single trinket that game companies decided to add. So, it's an era gone by, instruction manuals. It's too bad. But how about yourself? Have you kept any instruction manuals? What are some of the rarest ones that you have? Do you use them for your old games or your retro games, or do you just kind of keep them to the side? Feel free to talk about them in our comments below, or feel free to tweet at me at Retro Unscripted and tell me what you think of instruction manuals and how important you think they are or were. Until the next time, everybody, I thank you very much for watching Retro Unscripted. My name is Peter, and I will see you, maybe along with Mario, on the next episode of Retro Unscripted.